Hello everyone and welcome to my channel and welcome to another Sims 4 speed build. In today's video we are going to be building a country cottage in Henford on Bagley. So this is the world that come with the Sims 4 cottage living, and this is actually one of my favourite packs for when it comes to building. As a simmer who lives in the UK, I really loved it when they added in a English inspired world. And yeah, it's just really fun to build in, and I love a lot of the aesthetic that comes with this pack as well. So we're building on the 13 Nettle Lane lot. I can't remember what size this lot is, but I decided to go for a fairly small cottage and then make use for the outside space, and I really liked how this one turned out. So it is available to download on the Sims 4 gallery. I will leave all of the details in the description box below for that. But for this cottage, I wanted to have a build that was for an elderly couple who have maybe not necessarily lived in the city, but they've lived in a more built up urban area, and they've wanted to get away now for a while in their older years and live in the countryside. And here they are. So this cottage is big enough for a couple. It's only a 1 bed, 1 bathroom. It's only got a very small kitchen. It's got a nice size living space, and that little bump out that we have over on the right side, that ends up being a more like a conservatory style. So as you can see here, actually, when it comes to adding on the windows, I decided to do this glass all the way around to make it more, it just looks really pretty in my opinion. So I wanted it to still be part of the house. It's going to be their dining room, but I thought it looked nice that maybe they've extended the house by adding on a conservatory, but then they're using that space as their dining area, and it looks out onto the side of the garden and into the countryside. So it's a really nice spot, and I loved how it looked up against the house for this kind of build, for the design I had in mind. So I've built it's a very simple shell, as you can see. So we've built majority of that exterior now. I do believe the chimney at the side, that changes. I kind of didn't have enough space in the bedroom to get it to work how I wanted it, so I end up getting rid of that chimney bump out, and we make it an all-round bigger bump out further along in the build. A lot of things do change in this build as we go through it, to be honest. For example, this fencing doesn't stay white. Right at the end of the video, I decided to make this a dark brown wood color. When I was adding in some of the fencing in the back garden, I felt as though the white just didn't kind of match the vibe for this build. So as I was going through this build, I had pictures in mind. I had a couple of inspo pics saved on Pinterest, but I kind of ended up going quite away from them as the build went on. So it's quite fun to just sit down, play around and change out little bits in the design. I decided we would have this little driveway here, and I found this car in Debug, and I felt as though it fitted in perfectly for the style of the house. And I wanted the landscaping for this build, although it's the countryside, I wanted this particular garden to look quite manicured. I wanted to imagine that they really take pride in their front and back garden. So we add in lots of trees. I used a mix of trees from the Build Buy catalogue as well as Debug as well. I wanted trees that fitted in with the rest of the world, but then I wanted to add in lots of flowers and colours and things like that. This was as well the first time that I come across this hanging basket in Debug as well. So I added on a little bump out to the roof so that I could have that there at the front door, and I'm definitely going to be using that a lot more. Do you ever find, no matter how much you play The Sims, because there obviously is so many packs and kits and build buy content available now, that it's very easy to miss items, and then you come across them and you're like, wow, like especially when it's a base game item, I'm like, wow, how did I not know that was there? So that hanging basket, I don't know if it's maybe from a newer pack that I've recently downloaded, but I definitely haven't used that before, and I really liked it. So like I said, I had to add on to the roof to get that to work. I always like to finish up majority of the front of the property before I jump inside. So I'm coming in here, I loved these planter boxes. They kind of gave me the vibe of they were built from pallets, and I really love that style in real life. So I added them down onto the front of this fence. I added on some seating both on the inside and the outside of the fence. The outer ones, I feel as though they kind of give off a bit more of a brick wall vibe rather than an actual seating area, but I really liked that. And then I love this wisteria. I do use this a lot in my builds. I really wish we had some different plant tree things like this, not necessarily just wisteria ones, just anywhere you can add kind of like greenery or ivy growing up the walls. I really love how that looks. I kind of feel as though it adds a nice amount of realism to a build, and I especially love building the exteriors in The Sims, so I'd love to see more of that added to the game. I am adding in the ivy that I think this did come with the cottage living pack actually, up this side of the wall, and I do use some of this going up the fence in the back garden as well. I do come back to the front garden and end up adding a few more bits on, and we do also end up having a path that goes around to the back garden added on later as well. But for now, that is the majority of the front of the house done. I just come and done a little bit of terrain paint before we move on inside. And then when it comes to inside, I wanted to make sure I brought in some of this brick for the walls. I really like how that looks when you've got the stone inside on a cottage. I feel as though it just gives off the pure cottage vibes. So I added some of that in the kitchen, and I'm sure I use it in one of the other rooms as well. But for here, we're moving on and using a lot of the cottage living pack to create the kitchen. This was only a very small space, so it was a little bit tricky. I did remove this wall, so I added it in and then I removed it because I didn't want to have it open plan. I wanted the kitchen to be closed off, so I come in and added in an archway, but for build purposes I delete that wall so that I could make it a little bit easier to build, and then popped it back in. And then lastly I come in and added on this tile, and I didn't even realize when I was doing this build, but I got rid of the stone wall because I think I clicked shift and it just tiled the whole wall. So I did plan on that staying, but I can't remember if I went back in and changed it after I play tested and uploaded this to the gallery, because I did build this a little while ago, but I've only just got around to doing the editing and voiceover. When it comes to building kitchens, I love to add a lot of clutter, and I love some of the clutter that comes with the cottage living pack. It's just got the perfect cottage aesthetic to it. It's really cozy, homely looking. So I tried to add in as much as that into the kitchen as I could. I also added in the kettle, which I think comes with the For Rent pack, because I kind of just imagined that this is a proper old British couple who live here and they love a cup of tea. So you'll see throughout the build, when I'm cluttering up surfaces, I do add in some cups here and there to make it look as though they've been sitting down and having a nice cup of tea. So I had to make sure that the kettle was there for gameplay use as well. And then I love this yellow crock pot as well. I wanted to go for a bit of a yellow theme. Throughout this build, actually, we add in quite a lot of yellow and orange tones, so that sat nicely next to the bread bin. And then over to this side, I wanted to make sure I added in some upper counters, and I felt as though this shelving unit from Tiny Living gave off a bit more of a modern cottage vibe, but it fitted in there nicely and it filled that wall space without taking up too much space. And then as you can see, it's not a huge kitchen. I didn't want to overly clutter it. I wanted there to still be space for your Sims to use a surface and things like that. But we're then gonna move on over into the living space, which then goes off on to the conservatory side, which we're going to use as our dining room. And I went for a wood floor throughout majority of this build, apart from the bathroom and kitchen. I just felt as though it looked nice. We've got a lot of wood going on in this build actually, but I felt as though it looked nice. And then because I hadn't yet added in my windows for the rest of the build, I did just come down and place those in, and then we're going to jump back to decorating that living space. And here I really wanted to have a really nice cozy cottage vibe. I tried to add in a lot of older style items as well. So I add in the gramophone at one point, and if you played the recent base game event, sorry, not the base game event, the recent Sims event, I think for their 25th anniversary. I think it was called, I can't remember, the time travel event. I cannot remember what it was called. But if you played that, one of the rewards was the old style telephone. So I add that in here as well. But I just wanted this build to really feel a little bit old-fashioned. Maybe this older couple, they haven't moved with the times. They don't, for example, I didn't put a laptop or a computer in this build. I kind of imagined that if they need to use something like that, they'll head to the library. And I kind of tried to put older style TVs in here as well. So obviously here we've got a flat screen TV, but I've gone for the smaller size one, and then I put the older style one in the bedroom, and I wanted to add in loads of random ornaments. I remember when I used to go to my nan's house when I was younger, she used to just have the most random things, and she was never bothered about furniture being matchy or having the latest trends or anything like that, but she just used to have the most random things, and she used to go to car boot sales all the time and pick up really random objects and just stick them on her side. It wouldn't matter if there was no space or anything. So I kind of wanted to bring in a little bit of that vibe into this property, but I did want it to look a little bit more organized. So I loved some of these cutesy items from the cottage living pack for that. For example, the little gnome there and the chicken. I add a few more of these into the back garden as well, and there are a few cute bits from base game as well that fit with the look as well. I did end up going for quite a modern style rug. I didn't necessarily want to go for a plain rug here, but then a few of them that I would have leaned for a cottage build were a little bit too patterned for what I had in mind. I didn't want it to be too much patterns going on because we've got a very heavy pattern print in the wallpaper and then quite a heavy pattern print on the sofa as well. I did start popping down some clutter onto the coffee table. I loved the look of this little coin pot. It kind of just gave off elder vibes, and then the magazine stack as well. I don't feel as though magazines are very popular nowadays. They always remind me again of people like my nan, because it just seems a bit more of an older person thing. I like the idea of popping the glasses down there as well, and I love a lot of those items from, I think they're from the Everyday Clutter kit. We're then going to move on into the conservatory / dining room. I do further along in the build, when we get to the garden, add a back door on here, but for now it's just simply the dining room, and I kept it fairly simple. Wanted to make sure that there was a few indoor plants in there, and I really loved the colour of the table and chairs here. It just added in that pop of yellow. And I quite liked the idea that maybe the elder woman who lives here, she regularly changes up the colour of the tablecloth and the chairs, and you can easily do that by switching them out in Build Buy. If you was playing with the house and you wanted to change things up, you could easily just use a different swatch on a lot of the things that I've used with a yellow orange tone, and then it would change up some of the colour style of the build. So like I said, I just added a few potted plants in here, and then I pretty much left it as that, as I did want to make sure that there was enough space for the Sims to get around. And then we're kind of just jumping backwards and forwards here between the living space and the dining room and just popping any clutter items. I do change a few things around here and swap them around. I really wanted to put this vent in, but I just didn't feel as though I could find anywhere that it would work. I first of all tried in the conservatory and then in the hallway, and then I ended up just getting rid of it. But I loved this furniture unit here. I felt as though it worked perfectly for this space because it's kind of a mix of being a hallway item, but then we've got some fancy dinnerware in there as well. And this is where I popped down the older style phone, and I loved how it looked on there, especially where it's right where you first walk into the property. I did also want to imagine that this elderly couple have a cat. I kind of had the impression when I was building this that they'd be the kind of people who would take in a lot of stray cats. So I popped down the bed and the food bowls because I kind of just pictured maybe they've got a foster cat or something like that. And then I did also want to make sure that I included a few hobby items, because I'd imagine they've worked all their life, they're now going into their elder years, they've retired out to the countryside, so maybe this is where they're picking up their hobbies. So in the living room I did place down the violin. I do come back further along and I think add in the cross stitch box, but then in the bedroom I did also add in an art easel. and kind of like a bit of a space where maybe one of them could take up painting and that be their hobby. It's also a great way to make some additional money if you are retired in The Sims 4 as well. So we're just coming in now, and I did this room, I did the painting, sorry, the walls in this room quite plain, which is quite different to the living space, but I kind of just toned it down a little bit in here. And then also this is where I realized I just couldn't fit the bedroom how I wanted it to be. So I decided to have a little change round. I got rid of that chimney bump out. I did at first try including it, but I didn't like how it looked with the build. So I ended up just completely getting rid of the chimney and just having this side bump out to basically make the bedroom that bit bigger, because what I wanted to do here is have the fireplace, but I wanted to have built-in style wardrobes, and I'm going to do that with the kitchen cabinets. You will see when we get to there, but I wanted to go with a bit more, at first I wanted to go with a bit more of a pattern bed, but then I went for this one instead. Now this is what I meant about the built-in wardrobes. I know a lot of houses have these, where I have used obviously the larger style kitchen cabinets, but you have kind of like the 2-door built-in wardrobes and then the smaller cupboards at the top, and lots of people will put their bed between that area, but I popped the fireplace there, kind of ended up turning it into not a media wall, but you know, you've got the fireplace there, we added TV, but I really liked how this turned out. It looked a little bit different, and it was another way. Obviously they're not functional wardrobes, so I do put in a dresser so that you've still got the functionality of getting changed, but I quite liked how it looked, and I do hope that they at some point bring in some more style of wardrobe like that, because the built-in ones we've got, they look quite modern, so it would be nice to maybe have something a bit more traditional looking, but I feel as though I achieved it using these items. And then as you can see over in the corner, I've added in the dresser from Tiny Living. I was torn between those two, and then I do actually end up getting rid of both of those and adding in a more traditional style dresser. I was going to go with the one from Tiny Living because I felt as though it kind of added in a little bit of a mid-century modern vibe, but then I just didn't feel as though that worked with the rest of the room or even the rest of the build. So I went for this more traditional one, and it kind of matched the wood tones better that we've got on the bed and the cupboards and that as well, because I did kind of imagine that they would want a few things that matched as they've bought them over the years. And then this gave me the space as well to add in the arties, or if you don't want this, you could easily delete this item. I know not everyone would think to have an art easel in their bedroom, but I thought it was just a good spot to pop it down. And like I said, if you're playing, it's a great way to earn some extra money or build skills. I did add a nice large rug in here. I wanted it to feel nice and cozy, but it does have a very neutral color palette, so I jumped in and added in this yellow lamp and then just cluttered up the bedside cabinet. Usually I would like to add a bedside cabinet to each side, especially when it's a build where I have a couple in mind, but it just didn't fit in this room, so I do just add on the one, and then I cluttered this up with a few items, and then we're just going to go in, add a few last little bits. I wanted to make the room look full, but I didn't want to kind of have too many issues with routing for The Sims. I then see this room divider screen thing, and I felt as though it worked really nicely with the wardrobe idea, so I pushed this over as far as I could so that it's not in the way. But then I did pop down a pet bed there, and then when it comes to play testing, that was an issue, so I end up swapping the pet bed around in the room. I think I put it over the other side because I did go in and play test, and I think that was the only issue I had, so I had to rejiggle that around. But yeah, I really loved that divider screen. I thought it looked really nice, and it fitted with the look and the style of that bedroom. Moving on into the bathroom, it is only a really small bathroom, and I was going to put the shower tub combo, but then I didn't really like how that fitted in with the room, so I went for just a bath. I think ideally though it would have been better to maybe go for a shower and have a bit more of a spacious bathroom, but personally I love a bath over a shower, so I went with it for that. And I really love these new lights from the new base game update, but I do size them down one because I find that they look a little bit too big, especially in a smaller room, so I did size that down one. And then that is the inside of the house built. I'm not sure if I did it on camera, but off camera I did go in and add in the new burglar alarm at the front door, and I think I went in and added the smoke alarm, as I think I forgot that when I was doing the kitchen. But we've now moved on to the outside, and I did have a lot of fun doing the back garden of of this build. So I popped into debug, grabbed a few trees. I wanted a mix of trees, and I did also want to have this wall that is from the debug from Cottage Living in the debug section, because I didn't want to completely fence off this whole garden, as I felt as though it just wouldn't look right. But I also wanted to imagine that they have chickens. We add down the chicken coop, so I kind of imagined you'd want to have some kind of fencing. And then it also made use of this side space as well, because it meant I could put a path running from the front drive through to the back garden. And I really went in with the landscaping here. So we go in with the path, which is obviously like that chunky gravel look, but then I added in lots of flowers around the edges of it just to make it look really nice, well kept, and then all the colours of the wild flowers as well. Then we're going to go back in to finishing up that back garden. So this is where I'm going to add in the chicken coop, and I fence this off with the white fence, but this doesn't say white. We do end up changing all of the fence into a dark wood colour, but I added in some of the sand from the terrain paint to kind of make it give off sawdust hay vibes. I've never owned or looked after chickens, so I'm not sure what they might have, but I kind of felt as though that looked better than just having grass there. And then I added in, I always like to add in 2 outdoor bins because I think it just looks cool. It gives off the look of a recycling bin and a general garbage bin. And then we're just finishing up some landscaping. I do add in quite a few different things in this garden, but I kind of was jumping backwards and forwards as I was really undecided about how I wanted it to be. This is where I decided as well it would be nice to have a back door, because I do add in a barbecue area, and I kind of just thought it's a bit weird having to go out your front garden all the way around the build to get to the back garden if you was doing a barbecue, because I know for myself when I'm doing a barbecue I end up in and out of my kitchen loads, and the idea of not having a back door just didn't work. So I come in and added the back door on here, and I originally really loved the door from Spa Day, but it didn't have a matching wood swatch, so I went for this one from Base Game, because then that's going to fit with all the windows and it meant I could still get that full glass look. And then we're just coming in with some random items. I kind of just ended up filtering through the Cottage Living pack and trying to grab out as many things from that pack that I hadn't already used in the build. So we add in lots of flowers. I do put lots of potted plants in this garden as well. And lots of random items like this wheelbarrow with the flowers, and then this hay. I'm not quite sure what this is, kind of like a wagon with the hay barrel on there, and then I add in some haystacks in that chicken coop. And then I did decide to come in with the oversized garden plot thing so that you can plant the oversized vegetables in, because again I kind of imagined they've moved into the countryside and they're really embracing country living, and part of that is growing their own fruit and vegetables, so there's now the space for them to do that. And then of course I wanted to include the table and chairs, and then we add in a little barbecue area here as well. I didn't go in too much more with the barbecue area. I kind of just popped down the barbecue and left it at that. I was going to clutter it up a little bit, but I felt as though it didn't really need it. It looked fine as it was, so I went with that. But I wanted to make sure I added in as many plants as I could so that there was lots of pops of colour. I really loved how the little beehive and bug hotel looked. I decided to make the garden plot a little bit bigger and then do a fence around it as well. Kind of just, it wasn't needed, but it sectioned it off a little bit. And I did also stick a little rabbit down from debug as well. I'm not sure if that would stay there once you hit play, but I thought it looked cute in amongst the flowers. And then here I'm just going to go around, change up the wood fencing, and then we come in, add in some potted plants and some little clutter ornaments here and there, and then that pretty much brings us to the end of the build. I do also go in and finish up the terrain paint for the back garden and change the fence at the front as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I really enjoyed this build, so I hope you have all enjoyed watching. As I mentioned, it is available to download on the Sims 4 gallery. I'm really loving building right now in the Sims, and I have a little bit of free time on my hands coming up, so I'm hoping to get some more builds up on the channel. So if you do have any suggestions, do pop them in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed today's video, I really would appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up. As a new YouTube channel, it would really help. I'm really having fun doing Sims 4 builds for YouTube, so I hope you are enjoying watching them. I've left the end of the video, I've left some screenshots at the end of the video, but thank you all so much for watching. Take care, bye bye.